Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello everybody, my dear students. Our lecture today includes the direct method. Of course, it includes the introduction to the direct method. In our introduction to the direct method, we should connect it with the grammar translation method. The last lecture, we stopped with the weaknesses of the grammar translation method. We mentioned that the grammar translation method is unable to produce fluent speakers of the target language. It ignores the spoken form of the language and it depends on memorization of grammatical structures and vocabulary items. These weaknesses have led to the rejection of the grammar translation method and to the attempt to produce something new with new principles to language teaching. That's why we have the reform movement. The direct method was the product of a reform movement which was reacting to the restrictions of grammar translation method. It was considered vitally important that only the target language should be used in the classroom. So the first point and the first emphasis was given to the use of the target language in the classroom. The reformers believed that number one, spoken language is primary. According to the grammar translation method, written language is given the priority to spoken language. It is considered as the most important thing. But they started to think that spoken language is very important and it should also be emphasized in the process of language teaching. Number two, learners should hear the language first before seeing it in a written way. This refers to the fact that the students should learn the spoken form of a particular vocabulary item before they see the written form of the vocabulary item. For example, the students learn the word book and then they should know how the word book is written. 3. Words should be presented in sentences and sentences should be practiced in meaningful context and not taught as isolated elements. Here we have emphasis to the idea of context. According to the grammar translation method, the students are supposed to memorize lists of words, only words, individual words. In this case, the students are not using the words or the vocabulary items in meaningful context. But in the new movement, they think that it's very important to use the vocabulary item in a meaningful way. 4. The rules of grammar should be taught only after the students have practiced the grammar points in context. That is, grammar should be taught inductively. In our previous lectures, we distinguished between deductive and inductive of grammatical rules. The grammatical rules are presented deductively according to the grammar translation method, which means that the students are presented with rules and then they are presented with examples. Later on, the focus is on teaching the students or presenting the students with examples first. Then the students are supposed to know the rules. So this is the new way of explaining grammatical structures, which is inductively. Finally, translation should be avoided. It is not a very important or very useful technique in language teaching to the extent that it is given all the emphasis which it receives in the grammar translation method. The principles of the direct method. Before I start with the principles of the direct method, I want to know why it is known as the direct method. What is meant by direct method? The direct method, the DM, direct method, DM, is a method which depends on direct association between objects and concepts on one hand and words on the other hand, which means that the teacher is supposed to teach language directly using the target language by making associations between words and objects. For example, I can say this is a pen and present the pen in front of my students so they make the direct association between the words produced by the teacher and the object that they see in front of them. Also, the teacher can use different or refer to different pieces of furniture in the classroom, like chairs, like table, desk, different things, in order to teach them different vocabulary items. Also, sometimes the teacher uses the association between a word with a facial expression, for example, to express happy or sad, and so on. So that's why it is known as the direct method, because it depends on direct association and the teacher uses the target language to explain the material. The teacher is not allowed to use the native language in the classroom as or the medium of instruction as it is done in the grammar translation method. Now we come to the principles of the direct method. Number 1, classroom instruction was conducted exclusively in the target language. So the basic idea, the most important idea, that the teacher should use the target language to explain or to give the students instruction inside the classroom. 2, only everyday vocabulary and sentences were taught. This means that the students are not supposed to memorize large number of vocabulary items. They use they learn only the vocabulary items which are important in their lessons or in their everyday interaction with the teacher. 3, grammar was taught inductively. I have just mentioned the meaning of inductive explanation, that the students are presented with examples first and then they are supposed to know the rules or the grammatical rules. 4, new teaching points were introduced orally. Oral language is emphasized in the direct method in the same way in which written language is emphasized. So both are important, with starting with oral skills and then moving to written skills, because we mentioned that the students are supposed to be presented with the oral form, then with the written form. Both speech and listening comprehension were taught. The students should learn how to speak the target language as well as listening comprehension. And of course, you know that listening comprehension includes phoneme discrimination, that the students recognize the phonemes that they are listening to or the sounds that they are listening to, in addition to recognizing stress and intonation. 6, correct pronunciation and grammar were emphasized. Here we have a new emphasis. According to the grammar translation method, only grammar is emphasized, while in the direct method, both pronunciation and grammar are emphasized, because speaking the language is one of the goals of the students, or speaking the target language. 7, concrete vocabulary was taught through demonstration, objects, and pictures. Abstract vocabulary was taught by association of ideas. What's the difference between concrete vocabulary and abstract vocabulary? Concrete vocabulary refer to, or words that refer to, objects that we can see. These things or these objects can be explained by demonstration, by bringing different objects to the classroom, sometimes small objects like small cars, small chairs, or anything else. Pictures which are available in the text, or pictures which are brought in addition to the pictures in the text. While abstract vocabulary refers to ideas like feelings, like different ideas. So when the idea is abstract, the teacher depends on association, depends on connection between ideas. For example, we can use words of the same meaning or words of different or opposite meaning in order to explain the meaning of a particular word to the students. Also, the teacher can use context, that he produces the new vocabulary item in a sentence in which the students know all the other words except the new word. This helps them to understand or to infer the meaning of the new vocabulary item. These are the principles, or this is a general introduction to the direct method. Of course, we will take the details in our lecture, which includes the direct method, introduction and experience. In the introduction, I have outlined important points that you should keep in mind when you study the direct method. Number one, in the direct method, the goal of instruction became learning how to use another language to communicate. So the first idea is that the focus on the goal, which includes speaking or communicating with the target language. Grammar translation method was not very effective in preparing the students to use the target language communicatively. That's why we have the introduction of the direct method. The direct method has one very basic rule: no translation is allowed. This is a kind of repetition to what I have mentioned at the beginning of my explanation. The direct method receives its name from the fact that meaning is to be conveyed directly in the target language through the use of demonstration and visual aids, with no recourse to the student's native language, that the teacher can use any strategy to explain the material in the target language, with the condition that the native language is not allowed. Okay, so the native language is not allowed. In the experience, we have a lesson. We will now try to come to understanding of the direct method by observing an English teacher using it in Scuola Media class in Italy. So now we can understand the native language and the target language. The native language is Italy and the target language is English. Now I will also outline the most important things in the experience of the of the direct method. First, the teacher presents a reading passage. Before he presents the passage, we have a big map of the United States in front of the classroom. The teacher asks the students to open their books to a certain page number. The lesson is entitled Looking at a Map. So the teacher brings a map in front of the students, and here we have direct association between the map and the content of the passage. When the students read the lines, the teacher refers to the part of the map which is related to the particular line the students are reading. They read a sentence from the reading passage. At the beginning of the lesson, the teacher points to the part of the map the sentence describes after each has read a sentence. So first, we understand that we have direct association between the map and the content of the passage or of the reading passage. This is the first important point. Another important point: after the students finish reading the passage, they are asked if they have any questions. The teacher asks the students if they have any question in the target language, and they are supposed to ask the questions also in the target language. A student asks what a mountain range is. Now we want to understand what is the way in which the teacher answers the question. The teacher answers the question by drawing something which is similar to mountains on the board and making direct association between the word mountain range and the idea which is drawn on the board. The teacher turns to the whiteboard and draws a series of inverted coins to illustrate mountain range. The student nods and says, I understand. Again, the response or student's response is in the target language in English. Another student asks what between means. He asks about the meaning of the word between. Here the teacher uses another technique to explain the meaning of the word between. He says that you are sitting between Maria Pia and Giovanni. So he explains the idea of between by using the context in the classroom, and he makes use of the way the students are sitting. Another important point that then the teacher asks some of the questions of his own. Are we looking at a map of Italy? The class replies in chorus, no. When the class responds in no, the teacher asks them to respond in full sentences. So the teacher reminds the class to answer in a full sentence to help the students or to make the students practice the use of the language in spoken form. Another important point, which is the emphasis upon pronunciation. Oral language or spoken language is emphasized in the direct method. The teacher should pay attention to pronunciation. One of the students asked a question, where are the Appalachian Mountains? Before the class has a chance to respond, the teacher works with the students on the pronunciation of Appalachian. Then he includes the rest of the class in this practice. So the teacher understands that the students have a problem in the pronunciation of this word. That's why he calls them to repeat the pronunciation or the correct pronunciation of the word, because he thinks that they might have a problem with this word. So working on the correct pronunciation is very important for the teacher. Another important idea which refers to the idea in which the teacher corrects the students' errors. Here we have a very important thing, which is self-correction technique. The teacher uses self-correction technique. What's meant by self-correction technique? That when the student produces something incorrect, first he interrupts. Then he asks a question which includes the correct form, and he makes the students correct himself or herself. Later, another student asks, what is the ocean in the West Coast? The teacher again interrupts before the class has a chance to reply, saying, what is the ocean in the West Coast or on the West Coast? So here he is giving the students a choice. One of them includes the incorrect idea and the other one includes the correct idea, which indicates to the students that he is producing something wrong and he should correct it. The student hesitates, then says on that. Correct, says the teacher. Now repeat your question. What is the ocean on the West Coast? This is known as self-correction technique, which the teacher uses in order to help the students to correct their errors. Another important point, the teacher dictates a passage to the students. Now, the teacher asks the students to take out their notebooks and he gives them a dictation. The passage he dictates is 1 paragraph long and is about the geography of the United States. So he gives them a dictation, a 1 paragraph long dictation, and it is about the same idea of the reading passage. At the end of the lecture or of the lesson, we have certain important points that we should emphasize. Number 1, practice the pronunciation of river. So, the teacher emphasizes the pronunciation. I have referred to this point previously. I said that the pronunciation is very important and the emphasis is on spoken form as well as written form in the direct method. The students write a paragraph about the major geographical features of the United States. So, we emphasize pronunciation and writing. Both oral skills and written skills are supposed to be emphasized. But the idea is that the students first should learn the word orally, and then they should learn the written form of the word or a particular idea. Finally, discuss the proverb time is money. Students will talk about this in order to understand the fact that Americans value punctuality. They will compare this attitude with their own views of time. Here we have reference to understanding the culture of the target language. The teacher gives them a proverb and he tries to discuss the idea that time is very important and to relate the culture of the target language, which is represented by culture of the Americans, with the cultures of the native language. With the culture of the native language. Up to this point, we will stop, and later on we will discuss the thinking about the experience. We will discuss these points and outline the principles that underlie these ideas. Thank you very much.